Hello and welcome to the Long-Term Care 101, Unlocking the Policy Puzzle. So glad to have you for our session one of our five-part series. My name is Debbie Miller and I am going to be your instructor for this session. Let's take a look at our learning objectives for today. You will, by the end of this session, be able to define what long-term care insurance is and its role in home care. You will identify and explain policy structures, terminology, and benefits. You will also understand eligibility requirements, benefit triggers, and coverage limitations. And finally, you will recognize the most common reasons for delays and denials. All right, well, let's dig in and start at the beginning. I'd like to review the purpose of long-term care insurance. The main purpose is simply to save policyholders and their families money. That's what people were thinking about long ago when they purchased their long-term care insurance. There are other key benefits, though, that I'm going to review that people may or may not be aware of. The first one is that this policy can actually keep a policyholder independent for as long as possible. This surprises many people because there is a perception that you can only use your policy when you're pretty seriously ill. And as we go through this presentation, you'll see that that's not the case. The second key benefit is it has the ability to prolong a person's health. By utilizing a policy early on, getting a little help earlier than people would think, you can actually reduce the risk of falls, accidents, and other unsafe occurrences that inevitably lead to a cycle of decline. Think about a fall. It can put somebody in the hospital. That puts them at additional risks of other key issues. So we want to keep people out of the hospital. And again, by getting a little bit of help earlier on, we can help reduce those risks. Another purpose is to reduce the burden of care on a partner or family member. Relying on a spouse as an example for care can be dangerous for the caregiver and for the care recipient, especially when there is significant personal care required. So we'll talk about that as we go on through these sessions, but this definitely has the advantage of being able to save a person from that extreme stress that they can experience, especially when you think about a spouse will often be similar age, so older themselves, and may be battling some of their own health issues. So we want to alleviate some of that burden for sure. And then finally, people with policies basically have more options about how and where they receive their care. Obviously, they can afford care. Funds give people more control. But with the later policies, we see there's a lot more options that are presented where they can receive care. So let's dig in and look at the history of long-term care insurance. And this all began in the 1960s. There was that early concept of reducing healthcare costs, specifically for long-term care. And so mainly these policies focused on covering nursing home care for seniors. Ultimately, that was the only option at that time. And then in the 1970s, we had more private insurance companies gaining some traction, getting in on the scene here. And again, those policies really covered specifically for nursing homes and had some real strict eligibility rules. In the 1980s, we started to see the expansion of coverage. So policies evolved to include other service options like home care and assisted living. In the 1990s, the landscape of long-term care insurance really changed significantly. One of the reasons was because the US government began encouraging the purchase of long-term care insurance through favorable tax treatments. In 1996, the passage of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, most of us know that as HIPAA, that was a major turning point. HIPAA allowed taxpayers to deduct a portion of the long-term care insurance premiums as a medical expense, provided that they meet a certain criteria. So these deductions became more valuable as individuals sought tax advantage ways to prepare for future needs. Now, this is where we started to see a lot more comprehensive services or a varied service line being offered here in some of these policies. Start to see adult daycare, respite care, certainly home based care as well. So there was definitely a shift from facility based care to home and community based care. And that was often because we've got the baby boomers that were really demanding those kinds of home based services. That continued through the 2000s as long term care continued to rise in popularity. However, what we saw later on were challenges around the high premiums. So it was pretty expensive for people to be able to afford these policies. Now, where we've evolved to, though, are these interesting hybrid solutions that we see today. And so, what they often are is a long term care rider on a life insurance policy. I personally, this is what I have. So, these focus on personalized care and they're very flexible, so you can use it however you need it. And if you don't use it, you still have the life insurance benefit. So unlike these older policies, you if you don't use it, you lose it. Where in these hybrids, there's still some sort of cash outlay should you not need that long-term care insurance. All right, well, let's take a look at some of the policy types that you will run across. And I want to start with the reimbursement policy. All right, this is the most common type that we see. And what this does is it reimburses a policyholder up to the maximum daily amount stipulated in the policy. So if you're spending $100 a day for care, then they're going to send you a check for $100 a day of care to cover that cost. All right. So it's up to that maximum amount. If a policyholder has $150 maximum daily benefit, they are only going to get paid the $100 if that's what the care costs are. They don't get anything extra that they're going to be able to bank. Unlike an indemnity policy. Indemnity policy is like an annuity. They pay the stated maximum amount regardless of the cost of care. So if a caregiver coming to a person's house is costing $100 a day, but their maximum amount is $150 a day, then they'll receive $150 a day. So with this type of policy, a person can actually accumulate a nice cash reserve. And with this type of policy, it's definitely in their favor to start their benefits earlier than later if they qualify and be able to accumulate a nice little bucket of money that they may be able to use to stretch the length of time that they're able to take advantage of those benefits. So you've got the indemnity policy, a reimbursement policy, and then you've got a group long-term care policy. Often these were provided by employers as part of employee benefits. We see this a lot with the teachers' unions, lots of unions, and they tended to be a little more affordable with less stringent underwriting because they were doing these group policies. So the advantage is they could have an easier access to be able to actually activate their policy. And the third or the fourth one there are the hybrid policies that I spoke about earlier. The nice thing here is it guarantees value whether or not the services are required. All right, well, let's take a look at structures and key terms. And I want to begin with our glossary of terms. And by the way, you have a handout that you will be able to download with this and even more terms. All right, so let's take a look at elimination period. This is the waiting period before benefits are paid. Typically ranges between 30 and 90 days. Longer elimination periods lowered the premiums, but delayed the costs. So a lot of folks you'll see with 90-day elimination period because it made that monthly payment a little bit lower. They not realizing that 90 days out of pocket, especially if you're needing 24-hour care, is going to be pretty expensive when the time comes. So, but they were probably able to spend on their monthly premiums. Let's look at benefit period. This is the length of time the benefits will be paid, and the policy will stipulate 2 years, 5 years, or unlimited years. We'll talk more about that. Shorter benefit periods reduce premiums. Lifetime benefits provide extended coverage. The daily benefit amount, that is the maximum amount the policy will pay per day for eligible care. And this ranges between $50 to $500. And that is based on selected coverage. Okay, those earlier policies are going to be a lot less money, especially if they didn't have an inflation rider on them. Speaking of inflation rider, let's take a look at that. An inflation protection rider, what that is it adjusted the benefits over time to keep up with the rising care costs. Options include fixed increases like 3% annually, or adjustments tied to inflation rate. So it's really nice when you find somebody with that kind of rider and they're really shocked to see how much that daily amount has increased. Let's look at policy triggers. These are the conditions required to activate the policy. So for example, a person needs to prove that they need assistance with 2 out of 6 activities of daily living, or they have cognitive impairment. Activities of daily living, or ADLs, these are the basic tasks that a person needs to be independent: bathing, dressing, eating, toileting, transferring, and continence. Let's look at maximum lifetime benefit. Some policies are written with a total dollar amount that the policy will pay over its lifetime. We recently did a policy review on a lady that was about 87 years old, I think it was, and her policy was worth over $1 million. And do you know that about 6 months prior to her getting this policy review and coming in contact with us, she had received a letter from her long-term care insurance offering a buyout, offering to give her $40,000 in cash if she forfeited her policy. So once we realized that, and of course, given her age and the fact that she was actually needing surgery, we recommended that she obviously not forfeit or at least take the buyout. All right, let's look at non-forfeiture benefit. This ensures policyholders receive some benefits even if they cancel the policy or stop paying the premiums. It's typically another rider that they would buy extra money. But what's nice about it is it provides value for long-term care premium investment. So even if they cancel, they're going to get something out of that policy should they not, or should they forfeit it. All right, well, again, there is a very comprehensive glossary of terms that you can download after you finish this session. So don't forget to do that. You may want to start building an LTC binder to keep a lot of these documents in that you can refer to. Should you forget any terms, you'll always have those to reference. Okay. So the next thing is to understand, what does the policy cover? There are several coverage variations, and every policy is different. I have seen couples buy a policy at the same time, and they have different things outlined in their policy. It's amazing. So it's really important that we really delve into the specifics of each and every policy. Some more common variations include home care only policies. So they only cover the cost of care at home, of course, to cover the need for assistance with ADLs. Some policies cover nursing home only. Again, those might be those policies from the 60s or 70s. The more common variation is the provision for care at home, nursing home, or assisted living. These types of policies will cover whatever option it is that your client chooses, so it gives them a lot of choice. Some additional coverage, these are the bells and whistles that are included in some policies. Things like durable medical equipment. Some policies will cover things like walkers, canes, wheelchairs. Care coordination. This may be covered in a person's policy where they will provide a care manager to oversee the care and help with community resources and things like that. This can be really helpful, especially if the elimination period is waived with the use of a care coordinator. Sometimes it's tied. If you use a care coordinator, they'll waive the premiums. However, it can be a trap also. So you don't want to, or you as an advocate want to be very aware of this and maybe even offer to be on site when the care coordinator comes for a visit. All right. What happens is when we're dealing with seniors, sometimes they're proud. They don't want to admit that they need help with certain things. And so there's going to be the stranger in their home asking them to do this and to do that. And they say, well, I can do that. I don't need help with that. And that could actually disqualify them. So these are important things that you'll want to coach your seniors and families if they are expecting a care coordinator on site. Homemaker services. This is something, if they're receiving services, they may get some extra coverage with cooking, cleaning. So that could be an awesome addition. By the way, insurance companies don't tell policyholders about the additional coverages. All right, these bells and whistles, this is not something that they just volunteer. This is not information that, unless you've got somebody really going through the nitty gritty of that policy, they will ever find out about. I'll give you an example. You see on that slide, there's a picture of a chairlift. And we actually had a family. It was a husband and wife. The husband was caring for his wife who had dementia, quite severe dementia. And they were actually getting to the point, it was for both of them, they were struggling to get up and down their spiral staircase. It looked similar to this. And when we did the policy review, our specialist uncovered that they had a benefit of a $35,000 benefit for home modifications. So we were able to tap into that, work with a community partner, install the chairlift, and this couple is now safely going up and down their stairs. And you talk about a loyal client, boy, oh boy. He cried actually when we uncovered this and saw this all come to fruition. Pretty amazing. All right, so let's review how the policy is characterized. And this is really another important point when we're helping our clients formulate a plan for their long-term care needs. So there are three main variations. The first one is a finite bucket of dollars. Think about this as a bank account. All right, so basically a client might have up to $400,000 to use. However, your client will typically still have a maximum daily amount that they must adhere to. So in the case of a finite bucket of dollars, your client may want to stretch that out as much as possible to economize. All right. Now, we've got to keep an eye on the budget here. If we are providing long-term care for somebody and say they have a finite bucket of dollars, we want to be updating them on a regular basis as to where we are in that bucket of dollars. So how this would work is, say they had a maximum daily amount of $100 a day up to $400,000. So that may or may not have any time linked to it. It might just be the bucket of dollars for as long as that money until it runs out. All right, now defined period of time. You may see this language in a policy which provides a finite amount of time. So for example, it might be $200 a day for 5 years. And if you don't use the full daily maximum amount, the money doesn't carry over. So this is really important for folks to understand. Sometimes people may want to stretch or economize by using, say, half their daily amount, the half of their daily benefit. So say instead of 5 years, they want to use $100 and try to stretch that for 10 years. Well, it doesn't work that way. And if they're not using their full daily maximum amount, nothing carries over, and basically they're leaving money on the table. So again, we want to define that really clearly. The next thing is lifetime dollar amount. This is pretty straightforward. You've got a daily amount per day or maximum daily amount per day for a lifetime. This is phenomenal. We have a lot of clients with lifetime benefits. So as you can imagine, each of these options require a little bit of a different planning approach. That being said, I want you to know that half of people that own a policy die before they ever activate their policy. And of those who activate their policy, 70% pass away before their money actually ever runs out. So what we want to do is encourage people to get the care they need when they need it. All right, very important. All right, well, let's look at the elimination period. This is a person's deductible, the predetermined period of time in which they must need and receive covered care and pay out of pocket for those costs. One thing to note in relation to the elimination period is that these vary from policy to policy. All right, and each policy has a specific definition of an elimination period. And again, it may differ between husband and wife. Some policies have a unique definition of a day. For example, a policy may say that 1 day of covered services will count as 3 days toward their elimination period. Some may count 1 day as 7 days of elimination. So your elimination period can be actually shorter than what appears on the policy. Some policies will reduce your elimination period or waive it altogether if they use a care coordinator offered by the company. Again, an incredible benefit, but it's important that they understand the pitfalls and how to avoid the pitfalls. For example, if somebody has dementia and the nurse comes out to do the assessment and mom who has dementia says, yes, I can do that, that may disqualify her. So it's very important, again, that either you be on site when this visit happens, you let them know that they are, that she has dementia and that she's going to have some limitations in how she answers some of these questions. Here are some elimination strategies, okay? So what I recommend is that, even if a person is considering assisted living, they should start with home care. This allows them to economize through their elimination period on the number of hours per day. So most policies, an hour of care a day is equivalent to a day of elimination. So a day doesn't mean 24 hours. A day could mean 1 hour of care. So again, we need to understand how that is defined. So we could provide a few hours a day of care to help somebody through their elimination period. Say they have a 90-day elimination period and they are getting 4 hours a day, 5 days a week as an example. That is a lot cheaper than, say, $7,000 a month that they're going to be paying once they get into assisted living, that they're going to have to pay for those 90 days. So we can help them economize. You can help your clients also, maybe you don't typically offer shorter periods of time of care. Like, for example, you may have a limit to 4 hours a day. Somebody with a long-term care policy, you may be more flexible with that, knowing that they are going to turn into a long-term client. They will be with you for a long time, and they will be at the point where they're going to be getting a lot more hours. So again, this is something that you want to be thinking about to put you in a position to retain that client much longer. All right, well, let's take a look at some other considerations when we're looking at elimination period. Sometimes rehab and hospital stays, even home health may count toward an elimination period. So these are things that we'll want to know and certainly want to help families coordinate before they leave the rehab center. For example, ensuring that they have all the paperwork before they transition home with your care so that they can apply those days where they were in the hospital and or rehab toward their elimination period, and those they would want to be submitting those as the clock is ticking on those elimination days. All right, eligibility and benefit triggers. Long-term care insurance policies activate benefits based on specific policy triggers. These are the criteria that must be met for policyholders to start receiving coverage for those care services. All right, so the main policy trigger is a person's inability to perform their activities of daily living, those ADLs. And again, they typically need assistance with at least 2 out of the 6 ADLs. In some cases, it might be 3 out of the 6 ADLs. We'll look at the ADLs in more detail here in a minute. Another trigger is cognitive impairment. These are conditions like Alzheimer's or dementia that require a person to have constant supervision. Then the other things that must be met, a doctor's certification, and then, of course, a person has to have met their elimination period before benefits are actually paid by the insurance company. Now, in session 2 and 3, we're going to get into a little bit more detail and dig a little deeper into these policy triggers. But for now, I did want to take a look at the ADLs. These are those triggers where somebody has to need assistance with at least 2 out of these ADLs: bathing, dressing, transferring, walking, feeding, toileting, continence. What's very important to understand is, does the policy specify that the assistance must be hands-on or standby assistance? Some policies will list one or the other, or either one is acceptable. So let's take a look at hands-on. This is pretty self-explanatory, right? Typically, it is a higher level of care where you're actually needing someone to help this person in and out of the shower, actually wash them and dry them. We're doing a lot of those things for them. Standby assistance, however, means that you have somebody near that person to ensure safety while they carry out their activities of daily living, such as bathing and dressing. So an example is if somebody has balance issues or muscle weakness, it's safer for them to have somebody standing by while they step in and out of the shower. But while they're in the shower, they actually are able to clean themselves. Standby is defined as someone within arm's reach. All right, so this is a major safety precaution. And by the way, I would say about 60% of all of the clients that we serve who have long-term care policies, they are only standby assistance. So remember when I said the bar is a lot lower than we think to activate a policy? So even if somebody is a high fall risk and they should have somebody standing by while they do their activities of daily living, in many policies, that would be acceptable as a trigger to activate their policy and get care started. All right, well, let's take a look at the cognitive impairment trigger. And the standard wording in most policies state that a person must suffer from severe cognitive impairment in order to trigger the benefits. However, the standard under the state law is what typically applies. So here in Tennessee, it says that cognitive impairment must be such that you are at risk of harm to yourself or to others. Now, typically for this trigger, a long-term care insurance company is going to require some clinical evidence that this person does have cognitive impairment. So a doctor's assessment may be required, perhaps a mini mental. It's better if it's a full neuropsych evaluation, and this can definitely be more compelling, especially if a person is performing pretty well on their mini mental, but they absolutely cannot be left alone. Maybe they are forgetting and leaving the stove on, as an example. So if a person is trying to qualify with a cognitive impairment trigger, having them see a neurologist or psychiatrist that can do a full workup can be very beneficial. So that may be some guidance that you want to give your families in preparation for their prior to them activating their policy. All right, when a physician certification is required, here is some of the information that a doctor has to include in a long-term certification letter. They're going to need to indicate the patient identification, full name, date of birth, and the long-term care policy number. They'll want to include the medical diagnosis, the functional impairments, specific activities of daily living that the patient cannot perform without assistance. So have them actually name it. And typically, if you've already done the assessment, you might send the assessment that's already indicated that. Again, for cognitive impairment, the diagnosis is going to be very important if it's dementia, Alzheimer's, and how the disease is impacting daily function or safety. Let's look at medical necessity of care, an explanation of why long-term care services are required and at what level. So it might be hands-on assistance with all their ADLs, and then of course name the ADLs. So there's lots of different things that you want to consider there. And I've actually included as one of your handouts a sample of a doctor letter that you can download and make that available to your family so that when they do go to the doctor, they can have the doctor construct the letter in such a way that it will not slow things down. All right, so that they don't get denied. Let's take a look at the common issues in relation to long-term care policies. And what we want to do is to understand policy exclusions and coverage gaps. All right, so services provided by family members are typically not covered by long-term care insurance. So sometimes a family will think, well, I'm going to have my daughter look after me and the policy will cover that. That is not the case. Care provided outside of the US, most policies will not cover that. Mental health disorders related to dementia or Alzheimer's may not be covered, like depression. Sorry. Boy, that's a lot of D's. Let's look at coverage gaps. Limited or no coverage for home modifications. All right, so that's going to be a factor. The whole goal here in you understanding these things is so that you can communicate it to the family so that there are no surprises. So for example, if policies, the amount of daily fund does not meet what you're recommending in terms of care hours, then you want to communicate that really clearly and let them know, look, your policy is going to cover $50, but we're recommending $150. That means that you'll be paying $100 a day out of pocket. So really want to ensure that they understand what the insurance company is paying for and what they're going to have to pay for and have agreement to that. And then, of course, keeping an eye on where they are in their finite bucket as well. And then if they don't have an inflation rider, or if they do have an inflation rider, then you'll be able to help them understand what the difference is, okay? So understanding exclusions and gaps and helping you communicate that is going to help you avoid any surprises or disappointment on behalf of your clients, right? They don't want to have any unexpected out-of-pocket expenses. All right, another issue is that policies can lapse. So I'm going to talk about policy lapses. It does happen every now and then, and I've seen some really sad situations where a person had not kept up with their monthly premiums and they basically shut the policy off. One way of ensuring this doesn't happen is by naming a third-party addressee. This might be something you as a company want to consider doing for your clients. That I think this would be very important if you are accepting a via assignment of benefits. All right, if you are going to take an assignment of benefits, you would want to ensure that you're a third-party addressee. And what that means is any documentation that is sent from the insurance company, you basically get a copy of. So you can keep on top of any issues or anything that they're requesting on behalf of the client. Perhaps it's they've fallen behind and didn't receive, your timesheets. Well, you want to be aware of that and preempt that discussion with your client before they call you, and then of course rectify that. So there are lots of sad stories where somebody lets their policy lapse. It might be because of incapacitation. Maybe somebody ended up in the hospital, or perhaps they have dementia and they're not keeping up with their bills. So it's very advantageous for you to recommend to your clients that they have a power of attorney document on file with the long-term care insurance company. All right, for them to be able to talk to the insurance company, they are going to have themselves listed and the power of attorney on file. Otherwise, the insurance company will not release any information about that policy. And I've seen horrible situations where guardianship had to be appointed, ended up costing the family a ton of money. And that was just because this wasn't in place. So you, certainly when we do the policy review and the families involved, we always encourage them to send ahead of time that power of attorney document to the long-term care insurance company for their sake. All right, well, let's take a look at common reasons that a policy gets delayed or denied. All right, and so the first one is that a person fails to meet those policy triggers. All right, perhaps it's that they're not really needing that assistance with two activities of daily living. They may have to wait and until till such point where they do need that assistance. They may be missing or have incomplete documentation, such as the doctor certification. They haven't completed the elimination period before they started, or that's a really important thing that they must fulfill before they start to see the benefits. And care was provided by an unapproved provider or facility not meeting the policy requirements. And then finally, claims submitted excluded some important documentation. And that's where we come in. When we are committing on behalf of our clients to submit documentation that the insurance company requires, that is our responsibility and we need to take it seriously. So ensure that you have the infrastructure, you have an appointed person within your organization that's going to be submitting on your client's behalf on a regular, consistent basis. How to address some of these issues? Well, ensure that all the required documentation is complete and is submitted promptly. Verify that care providers meet the policy's licensing and certification standards. You may find some policies, and I've seen this over the years, where it says home health organization. That and when they define it, it's somebody that actually has a nurse on staff. Well, in Tennessee, we don't require nursing, and so for our licensure, so that's a problem, and we've had to battle that out many times. And there were times when this wasn't possible. Home care was not possible for our clients. You want to confirm all policy triggers and eligibility requirements are met before they file and activate the policy. And of course, maintain regular communication with the insurance company and track claim progress. All right. Well, we are going to have some legal advisors that are going to be participating in your training. I will be introducing Steve and Kevin Dunn to you in session 2. And they are going to go into a lot of detail on the things that we can do as an agency to ensure that our clients don't run into denials and delays. And I'm sure that you will learn so much from them. They've been mentors to me for many years and have actually helped clients of mine who were really came up against the insurance companies and needed somebody to defend them. And so they are a legal team that specializes in long-term care cases, and they will fight on behalf of your clients to ensure that they get what they've been paying for all of these years. All right, well, I want to wind things down here with this case study. And this is an actual case that I am familiar with here in my own agency. And I've changed the names, but everything else is exactly what happened. So this was Evelyn Thompson. She was 78 years old and she was a widow. And she had been living with her husband, George, in their home for 50 years. George was the primary caregiver for Evelyn. And when he died unexpectedly of a heart attack. And the family was left to confront the reality of their mother's care needs without the support of their dad. And the reality is that her kids had no idea how much the dad had actually been doing for their mom. So the kids are Sarah, Susan, and Mark. And with their dad passing away, they are now faced with the overwhelming task of providing care for their mom. And they quickly discovered that she needed help with pretty much everything. She had major mobility issues. There wasn't a lot that she could do on her own. And now the kids have their own families. All three of them still worked a job. And so they were in quite a bind. Well, after Sarah took on the responsibility of mom's finances, she saw through the bank account that there was this monthly premium that her mom had been paying for her long-term care insurance. And so she happened to mention it to somebody at church, and the church lady recommended our services and said that we do this policy review and that, she had a friend who used our services, et cetera, et cetera. So she called us and we scheduled a policy review. We scheduled an assessment to determine exactly what her needs were. And the policy at the, quick glance, she was eligible for up to $300 a day for her benefits, which is incredible, right? What an amazing financial relief for that family where they could actually get some care. But what we discovered when we did the policy review was that she had an inflation rider on that policy and that it was actually $420 was the maximum daily amount for her to receive care. The sad part is that George, the father, didn't utilize the long term care insurance policy to cover the costs. And the daughter said to me that she regretted so much not really understanding all that dad was doing for the mom and that, didn't have that conversation about what can we do to get some help. Then he may have mentioned, well, we have this long term care insurance. So he may or may not have realized that she was eligible to activate the policy and get that kind of assistance. But here we were now able to at least help this family. And the saddest thing that the daughter said is, wow, dad probably had a heart attack because of all the added stress of caring for mom, which they were now bearing the burden of, right? So they were shouldering all of that responsibility and seeing how stressed out they were. So it was really sad. But at the end of the day, what an incredible benefit we were able to uncover and tease out. We were able to also get some DME in place for her. The kids were just had such a peace of mind knowing that mom's daily hour, like all her daily hours were taken care of. She went to bed at a pretty early hour and stayed in bed most of the night. So she was okay to wait it out through the evening until our caregiver got there in the morning. So incredible benefit that we were able to provide. And this is where advocacy comes in. And these are the kinds of things that you will be able to do for families like this. You will be able to really educate them on the benefits of the policy, provide care that they just absolutely had to have. And yet, in this particular case, they were so adamant about keeping mom at home. She had lost her husband. She was in her own familiar surroundings. She had mild dementia, so she did much better in her familiar surroundings. And they were really adamant about keeping her at home. The son didn't live too far, so he was able to pop in on her, especially at night if there were any kinds of issues. He was able to take care of that. So they were very determined to keep her at home, and they were able to do that with all that we could bring to the table. And so as you embark on this journey, you're going to be able to do more and more for your clients, for your families, and for your community. And when you're able to be out there and educate your referral sources on all that you can do to help seniors navigate this very confusing long-term care insurance, and they recognize that it is, and everyone's heard the horror stories of somebody not getting the services they needed because they got the runaround from their long-term care insurance. You're going to be able to come in and say, no, I am going to advocate for them. Call me, I'll take care of the rest. I'm going to pave the path forward to the care that they need. And so it's going to be an incredible thing for you to be able to do in your community. So I look forward to being with you again for other upcoming sessions. For now, what I'd like you to do is upload the documents that we talked about earlier. complete the quiz. This is a very critical standard here. And we ask that you get at least 80% on your quiz to pass. Once you do that, you will be able to move on to the next session. And in this case, it will be session 2. All right, well, bye for now.